In terms of discipleship, that's where I want to start. So as a church, from time to time, we do a survey to ask questions regarding discipleship. So a few months ago, we did one that we do with the whole congregation. We do that every second year. And then every other second year, we do a survey with our leaders. And most of the questions is about your discipleship. And so some of it is to get information about like where we can improve as a church. But some of those questions is just honest reflection where people are saying where they are stuck the most or where they want to grow the most and which areas are they actually flourishing. And so when it comes to the questions of reading your Bible and the question about prayer, those are the two areas in all of our environments, in the first service, second service, evening service, and at the North Campus, all of our environments, our people are saying those two areas are the two areas they are struggling with the most. And so that's not necessarily a reflection of the church, that we're not preaching the Bible and praying on a Sunday or in our groups. What people are saying is in their individual times, in their quiet times, they are struggling to actually sit down, read their Bible, and then actually with prayer. And those are two areas that our people are saying through our survey they want to grow in the most. And so this is information that I just share with you so that you can pray with us for wisdom, because from next year, we're actually going on a breakaway, myself and Brent and some of the leaders, our leadership team in Bloemfontein, and we're going to be starting to plan next year. And here's the big question, is how do we put Bible reading and prayer as an area of growth for us as a church, not only on a Sunday in our groups, but for you as an individual? How can we empower you as an individual, and then also just understand the current moment in culture in terms of how to grow in Bible reading and prayer? So for us, that's a big question mark at this moment. And you can pray with us that we would grow in terms of how we disciple one another as a church community. So those are two areas that we're going to be making focus of for the next few years. And then, and I know they're obvious ones. We always, prayer and Bible is always a focus. But our people are saying, like, look, we're really stuck in this area, so we really want to figure that out. But then the third one that also scored very low is our people's experience of group life. And what we've said is also not only the number of groups, but also the experience inside of our groups, we want to figure out. And so here's the reality, is that life has changed. Culture has changed. And if you've been part of church for a long time, you will know that 20 years ago, group life was a lot easier than what it is now. The amount of activities that our kids have got at school and the pace of life and the demands that, just of technology in our lives is radically different from 20 years ago. So the way that we do group life, we're going to have to really ask good questions and innovate around that so that it can serve our church in a meaningful way. What we will compromise on sometimes is model, like how we do it. That changes with culture. But there are certain values, like the fact that church is to be together and to meet in one another's homes is part of the gospel story. And throughout church history, Christians have never been doing it by themselves. We always do it in community. So community is the value, but how do we create value in the 21st century in Bloemfontein? That's the question. How do we create community that is not only a Sunday experience, but that you've got a few friends in this church that you are closer with and that you are journeying with in terms of Bible and prayer? And so that's a third question. So those are three focus areas for us as leadership going forward. The second slide, just some feedback. Attendance for us is not the main thing. That first slide is the main thing. I would much rather only have a church of 50 or 100, but people understand community, they're living in that community, and they are growing in terms of their Bible reading and in terms of their prayer life, than have many people that just come for a service, because the church is not a service delivery company. We don't come to a service, we come to a celebration. We celebrate Jesus together as disciples of Jesus, but it's not like the band and myself is giving you a service, okay? And so for us, we don't want many people just to attend the service. We want people to be discipled in fellowship and in prayer and in reading Bible. But attendance is still worthwhile looking at, because here's the truth. Healthy things grow. And so sometimes if there's no growth, one can ask the question, okay, what are we missing? Because if I'm excited about something, I'm going to keep on inviting my friends. And so this next slide of attendance is really a testimony. It's something that we can celebrate. There's things that we need to, pray for and be maybe more concerned about. And then there are things we can celebrate. This is one we can celebrate. You guys are very excited about what's happening here because you're inviting your friends. because the stats are showing us that. Over the past few years from 2022, the English service has been growing and more than doubling. And so we really celebrate that there's about 330 people part of our English morning congregation, and that includes the kids and the teenagers also. And so we really just celebrate that, and well done for inviting your friends. It means that you are passionate about your journey with God. But then going on to the next slide, as we are growing as a congregation, which we really celebrate, that first part of the next slide called group life. Are we there yet? Oh, yeah, we are. Yeah. At group life becomes even more important. Because now that we've grown to, more than 300 people in this building, and I know it will continue to grow, we can seat about 700 people easily, and then we can still pack chairs at the back. So don't stop inviting your friends. Brent wants to fill this place. He's got faith for that, and I celebrate that. But we can't do that, but not also grow in terms of our group life. Because then it will only become a Sunday experience. And we don't want to build this church only around Sundays. And so as we grow, 300 and something people, I reckon when it comes to groups, we are a little bit behind, which I understand there might be a lag. But I want to encourage you, if you know that God has called you to open up your living room to host a group, come and talk to Brent. He might tell you that you're not ready yet, but then he's going to walk a journey with you until you are ready. Or he might tell you, you are ready, let's go for it. But if you're willing to open up your home, because there are many people sitting in this building that need to form part of a smaller community so that we can do discipleship together. And so we want to see our groups grow, not only in quantity, but also in quality. That's going to continue being a focus area for us. Then the second one that we celebrate is that we've got about 65 people on a good Sunday that actually make everything work. 65 free willing volunteers that come and serve this church so that you can experience Jesus. And so I want to celebrate all 65 of you, people at the tech team, on the worship team, at the coffee team, everywhere, just serving at kids ministry to make everything happen on a Sunday. And so well done for being part of this dream and owning it with us. And I do want to invite you, if you don't serve on a Sunday yet, if you want to get involved in church, make a few friends. This is the easiest place to make friends. Obviously, groups is a wonderful way, but also come and serve on a Sunday, go to the coffee team, and they'll do all the training for you. And if they say you're not good enough with the coffee, you can do the payments. Okay, so then they'll give you something to do. But you're going to make friends along the way. And so I want to invite you to that. But we celebrate many people actually serving here on a Sunday. Our kids ministry, about 55 kids at our church. And this number, in comparison to the amount of adults we have, is healthy enough. But we actually have got faith for many more children. So we are trusting God for many more young families. That's why we invested there in the back of the auditorium, so that we can accommodate young families, because we want to see many more kids in this house, because our facilities can actually accommodate many, many more kids. And so we're excited about that. And then we've got about 40 or so teenagers from it's high school learners that are part of Fusion, and we celebrate that also. And then we go to the next one. So when we talk about finances, there are two important reasons why finances matters to all of you who are part of this church. Firstly, you want to know that we're going forward, and you want to know that we're going to be okay, we can still pay the lights, so that we can continue to preach Jesus and do the wonderful work of impact that we're doing in our city. So obviously there's the responsibility side, but then on the other side, what matters a lot to me is the idea of buy-in. You know, the number of givers tells you how many people are dreaming with us and actually bought into owning this dream with us, and not only consuming a service. And for me, that's actually discipleship. It's part of our discipleship journey. If you say Jesus has my heart, then it means he must have your whole life, which includes your wallet also, right? And so for us, it's actually discipleship. And that's why the amount of income for me is not the most important thing always, but it's rather the number of givers. Because number of givers speaks about discipleship. Income differs from church to church, because some churches are in more affluent environments, other churches are in poorer environments, and sometimes there's economic realities. And so how do you measure that? That's a little bit difficult. So, some will have less and some will have more in terms of churches. But the number of givers as a percentage of the amount of people in the church, I think for me that's more important to be looking at that. And so in our English morning service, I think this in particular is one of those areas. We've got areas we celebrate, but then one of the areas that we need to grow in this service is most certainly this one. And so that's that slide. So in Bloemfontein, we've got about 400 families that are contributing toward the finances of this church. And then in the South Campus, it's about 250. But of those 250, only 63 families are in our English service. And so this is a very, how can I say, when we saw this, myself and Brent, we've been speaking about this, saying, hey man, we really trust God that this will grow. And so I want to invite you, if you are one of the families that you see yourself as part of this church, but maybe not yet financially, I want to encourage you, even if you have to start small, but just start somewhere, because sometimes it does something in your own heart. If you become financially involved, it connects yourself to that place. It anchors you in that place, saying, this is my place, I take responsibility. And that's also going to be very positive for your own discipleship. So I want to invite you to come along with us in terms of this journey, that we'll see that number of 63 families that are contributing each month actually grow. To those 63 families, I want to say thank you and well done for carrying this vision with us. Then, before I go to the next slide, don't show it yet, we want to show you just in terms of the income where we are at as a city, as a family in Doxa Deo, but then also as a campus. But before I explain that, I want to just take the time to explain our financial model to you in Doxa Deo. So if you're part of this church, I know that if you care about this church, you want to know, how do we think about finances and how do we steward our finances as a church? So how our model works is that we are a very missional movement. So Doxa Deo as a family, there's about 35 churches. And what that means, if I say we're missional, we share one wallet, one budget. Okay, so the churches are financially not independent from one another, but we are dependent on one another. And the reason for that is that way we can plant more churches if we take care of one another with our finances. So let me give you an example. So a few years ago, we planted a church in Durban. Now that's a new church plant. And because they have to pay rent for their venue, and we want to pay Lorraine a salary because he's heading up that plant for us, and there are other expenses that also goes into a church plant, they are not at the place yet where they can cover their own expenses as a campus. But as a Doxa Deo family, we say, don't worry about the expenses because we want to plant a church. And so for a number of years, we carry the church plants. And that way, as a family, whenever there's budget, we can continue to plant more churches. A few years ago, we planted the North Campus, and it was only possible because of the South Campus. Because the South Campus said, we'll fund it. We'll, take that ownership. And now, after 4 years, the North Campus is at the place where they are covering their own expenses and a little bit more. They're starting to sow into the Doxa Deo family. And so that way we can plant more. So we're all about mission. And so what this means is if a church with their tithes and offerings gets more in than what their expenses is, we don't buy cars for the pastors, we don't build new buildings. If a church has got more in than what the expenses is, that extra goes to the family to go and support church plants or go and support churches who are busy struggling financially, because we bought into and I love that. And so there are some churches in Doxa Deo that are only using about 50% of their income. Their expenses is only 50% of their income. The other 50%, that church never sees. It just goes to Durban or wherever there's a new church plant or wherever there's a church struggling. And I would love for us to be that kind of church. That we get more in than what our expenses are, and that we are a blessing beyond our borders. And so that's in terms of tithes and offerings. And so I think with that, that's why I share with you the family budget, where that is at. And then the second thing that I want to share before I show you the slide, and then we'll start wrapping up, is that we do cross-subsidization. So because of ownership, that we're not just dependent on the big brother that's going to look after us or something like that, we say that each campus should take responsibility for their own budget first. And if you cannot, then in a city, we will cross-subsidize. So like the South used to help the North when we planted, if the South is going through a difficult time, the North can then subsidize the South. We work together, one budget still in the city, we subsidize. But then if a city is short, then the family can subsidize. So we still want ownership, but we always help one another in terms of cross-subsidization. So that's just our financial model. Sorry if that's too much info for you, but I know there are many of you that you actually do want to know this. And so it's for your sake that we share this. So next slide, that's the reality year to date for 2026. And you've got it on your phone also. But as a family, we are thankful to the Lord that we are only 2% behind. I was worried about the 2% as a family, and then one of the guys in our church that's in like the corporate world, he told me, Abel, it's okay. Like 2% is nothing, like you're there. So God has been providing for us as a family, and that's the important one. But we are 2% behind, but we're trusting God for that. But at this moment, that's where we are in comparison to our budget. And then the second one is as a city, it's a slightly bit lower. So as a city, we are 4.5% behind budget, but it's still manageable. And the reality is in this year or the past 2 years, it's been that the North has been over budget on the green side, and our South campus, we've been struggling a little bit, but then we can cross-subsidize a little bit to make the picture a little bit better. So that's why it's at 4.5%. At our South campus, our current reality, and that's the area where we need to trust God for in our South campus, is 11.2% behind budget at this moment. And in terms of growth as a city with the two ministries together, we've grown from last year by 3.6%. The North Campus has had something close to 20% growth in terms of the finances, and we praise God for that. But at our South Campus, we've actually declined by 6%. And so those are some of the realities. Not much we can say about that, but I want to share that with you so that you can pray and trust with us that God will provide for us. And also that our finances, specifically at the South Campus, that it will become an area of growth for us as a church. And then to wrap up with the final two slides. So in this church, if you're part of this church and with your finances you want to contribute, there are 3 areas that you can contribute to. The first one, which should be the priority, start there. If you're starting, start there, is your tithes and your offerings. Your tithes and offerings, that goes toward our normal expenses. The budget that I just showed you, everything goes toward that. And if there's extra, it goes toward the family. If we're short, the family then helps out there. But that's our tithes and offerings. Then additional to that, whenever we want to do a building project, because we said we don't want a church to just have nice facilities, but then we're getting behind on the mission. We'd rather plant churches than just give you nicer seats or whatever. And so that's why whenever a church wants to do a building facility or facilities upgrade, then we actually say, let's raise those funds almost additionally to the tithes and offerings. And that's what we've done with our building project. And then the third area where you can contribute is not only to facilities, but it is to our generosity fund. Our generosity fund, we don't use that money for this church. We use it for ministries outside of the walls of this church to the benefit of Bloemfontein. And so I want to give you just feedback on the building fund and generosity fund also. So thank you for everyone that's been contributing toward that. So let's do building project first. So that's the second stream where a person can give. We asked for 230,000 Rand to do all of the work there at the back, which we've completed. And like any building project, doesn't matter if you're a church, you always go a little bit over, right? Anyone's ever built something will know. You go a little bit over, but that what we've went over, we're going to try and make up with our venue rentals, income stream that we have as a church, and still trust God for 230,000 Rand from our church environment. We already have almost 140,000 Rand. We need about 90,000 Rand still, so you're welcome to contribute toward that if that's an area of passion for you. And then the last slide, the generosity fund. We want to celebrate. Over the last year, we have been able, so even though we're a little bit under pressure with our tithes and offerings budget, I don't want us to miss this one. Additional to tithes and offerings, people in this church have been giving toward our generosity fund to bless other environments. And through that, we've been able to sow. And so the first one, more than 400,000 Rand that we've been able to sow with our TREE project, which is the youth workers that we put in schools, and we support schools also. Some of those workers we also develop in church, so there's a little bit of a benefit in terms of people working at the church, but it is really aimed at schools. But then the other one is our life center that we're setting up, so our support groups, all of that we're busy building, and really have got lots of faith for what's coming there. And then more than 200,000 Rand that we've invested into the Free State Residential Care Center. It's a house for people that are mentally disabled, and so we are supporting them. They've got safe workspaces there. We've built bathrooms for them. The church has no benefit in terms of what we're sowing there. Other needs they had, we could sow money into that space. So well done. We've been a blessing to the Free State Residential Care Centre. We also sowed into Kingdom Vision Foundation, 50,000 Rand. Then Anchors of Hope, also El Piso House for Babies, also we've just sown 50,000 Rand. And then Street Store cost us about 86,000 Rand. And then our bus ministry has cost us about 50,000 Rand, that we are helping other people so that they can get to church. They still pay a little bit, but we subsidize those costs. And then the last one there is other churches. We've spent about 160,000 Rand into other churches. So some of it was investing into Durban, where we had to send cars down or have to buy something for them if they need something. But then most of it was in Bloemfontein, where we just blessed other church leaders. Not long ago, we blessed 30 church leaders. We bought them from this fund. We bought them a restaurant voucher and a weekend away voucher to the leader, and just tell them, just take your wife on a date. And we just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing for Bloemfontein by leading a church. And also some of this we sown into other ministries like Israel Taylor, who's an evangelist who does work in Soweto and the Cape Flats. He does a work that we don't do as a church because we're called to something different, but we love what he's doing. And so we've also sown money into that ministry. And so we have been a blessing to them. Let's all stand together. And so I want to say thank you also that we've been able to be generous outside of the borders of this church. And that's the kind of church that we want to be, is a generous church.